Well, hello everyone. Welcome again to Just Talk Live, and hello, Destiny. It's really good to see your face. Uh-oh. You there, Destiny?
I'm back. I think I
Okay.
glitched for a second. Sorry.
She's back, everyone. Perfect.
It's
Well,
good to
it's
be
good.
with you, Lee.
Good. So tonight we are going to be welcoming our recurring friend who has been on here for, I think this might be the third time.
Yeah, third or fourth.
Third or fourth
Keeping track.
time. Guthrie Graves-Fitzsimmons, who is the author of. We'll bring him on first, and then we'll welcome Guthrie.
So glad to be back. I love every time I get the chance to come on.
My gosh, we're so excited to have you, and we're really excited because today your book came out, and voila! So Guthrie is the author of Just Faith: Reclaiming Progressive Christianity, and he is here to talk about his book. So Guthrie, we'll start with, what does the title mean, Reclaiming Progressive Christianity?
Well, let me step back and kind of talk a little bit about why I decided to write the book, and then that will kind of go into the title. I was raised in a pretty progressive Methodist church and have been involved in progressive Christian churches my entire life. And so I kind of have sensed this unease by a lot of progressive Christians in talking about our faith in public, and sort of we're all kind of centering conservative Christians when we talk about Christianity. And there was one moment in particular that really kind of focused my attention on the book. I was at the headquarters of a denomination, I won't say which one, and someone came into the lobby and said, "Is this a church?" And the person that greeted them said, "Yes, but not that kind. We're always saying we're not that kind of Christian. We're not fundamentalist. We're not conservative. We're not this, that, and the third." And so what drove me to write this book was trying to say, we're progressive Christians. There's a long history of people putting their faith into action for the common good, for human dignity, for civil rights, for so many different issues, for the environment. And we have a lot of work to do in this country and in this world. But we're not the first ones to be like, wow, the gospel calls us to care about social justice and economic justice. So I want us to reclaim that. It's not gone away. Like I said, I've been a part of these churches my entire life that have been trying to do this work. But there is a sense that we're the anomalies or the outliers. And I want us to be bold and kind of not center the conservative voice. And I believe our faith is something that we can champion, and sort of why we're involved in activism. And so that's kind of the story behind both the title and the book.
Thank you, Guthrie. First and foremost, congratulations. And we are so excited that we can take you for a brief moment to be here with you on your release day. Today is your release day. Like, this is the first day your book's coming out. So Just Talk Live is so happy that you decided to be with us. And some of the things that you were lifting up and saying is the reason why I think you are a reoccurring guest. We do need to change that narrative of what is the right way how to do Christianity, and it is nothing new. And so I think that's something that Leah and I set out to do. But for your book, what is something that you want people to take away by reading? Or, like, why should I read your book?
I hope it encourages you as you do this work, this amazing ministry y'all have of Just Talk Live, and your broader ministry with the PCUSA. And no matter who is watching tonight and how they put their faith into action for social justice, I hope this book encourages them that they're not alone. often if you're like the one kind of progressive church in your city, or maybe you're a progressive Christian in a church that feels much more conservative than you would like, you can feel very lonely. And I've met people through my work working at the intersection of faith and politics. I've had the chance to meet Christians all across the country, and it's the same from New York City. I was just guest preaching at a church a few weekends ago, 2 churches that had a combined service in New York City. I've heard this on the West Coast, and I've heard this here in Louisville, and everywhere I go, I hear people say like, I feel so alone. I feel like anytime I bring up my faith, you get a very negative reaction from people. And it leads people to not want to talk about their faith because we'll be associated with conservatives. And so my hope is that people feel comforted and they feel like, you know, a little less an outlier. You know, there are millions and millions and millions of progressive Christians in every city, in every, you know, medium-sized town, and a lot of small towns across this country. You will find amazing churches. They may not be all the same denomination or anything, but you will find great churches that are out doing social justice work. And so I hope you feel less alone. And then the second thing I hope that comes out of this book is that it starts a conversation. The best thing people have said is, maybe I knew all of this, maybe not all of it. Maybe there are some things you'll learn, hopefully. But you may be familiar with a lot of the ideas in the book, like the social gospel's not new. The idea of the civil rights movement and liberation theology are like the foundations of all of our work. That won't be new to a lot of people that will pick it up, but I hope they can share the book. People have said, oh, I want to buy this for my coworker, or I'm going to buy this for my mother even, which is the most amazing thing, that sometimes we don't have all the words. And I hope it can also serve as like, wow, I like this is, you know, this resonates with me and I want to, you know, share it with somebody else. And that like Bible study groups and Sunday school classes can read it as a group and then talk about like, what does this long tradition mean to us and how are we living it out in our local community?
Yeah. And I really, and I think we've had a lot of discussions because of this show. Destiny and I have really talked about, like, you know, back in the day, the televangelists, which are kind of are automatically connected to a more conservative theology, a more fundamentalist theology, and we talk about why progressive Christians didn't hop on that bandwagon. You know, the fundamentalists were so good at kind of portraying and like putting it out to the public, their beliefs through media and all this kinds of stuff. And it's just interesting that progressive Christianity didn't hop on that bandwagon. And now we're seeing the church, and I won't claim credit. I mean, Destiny and I have started a little trend. We might not have been one of the first ones, but we were kind of in that first group to kind of get on, you know, like some kind of media to kind of get that there's another way of being Christian in the world. And so I also wonder, how do progressive Christians get out there and more and better ways than it has been done?
Well, Just Talk Live is such a great example of what I talk about in the book, about being more vocal about our faith, about using technology, about using social media, all of these different tools that we have as a force for good. I do want to recognize that the urge to not kind of broadcast your faith is a good one. The idea that, you know, our actions should show that we're followers of Christ rather than, you know, yelling at people about it or even talking about it explicitly, that our lives are our witness and how we live our life. And I think that's a really good impulse. So I think the reticence to like have a talk show where you talk about faith and comes from a good place. And because conservative Christians have been so loud and effective, I think that's enough reason at all. I do think there's a way to talk about that. Jesus did use words in the Gospels. It wasn't just, there was some, vocalization of what this way of love means, this way of loving your neighbor. You have to sometimes use words. And I think we have to use the tools partly because conservative Christians, like you said, have been so good at it. So, I mean, the average person that maybe hasn't, that wasn't brought up in the church, and I hear this from people that, because that wasn't my experience, but I hear from them that all they heard about was conservative Christianity. We have people that come to our church here in Louisville, Highland Baptist Church, and they said, I had no idea until I read maybe something about your church in the newspaper or saw your website that this kind of church existed. How is that possible? Who is you have to step back and be like, what? Another example I talk about in the book is that 2 Presbyterian PCUSA pastors go to visit President Trump, a Presbyterian member. Not sure he's been in a Presbyterian church in a long time, but he does consume a lot of media. And so the pastors are with him. CNN told this story, and I reference this in the book. And he said, I did so well with the evangelicals. That's like how he greets them. And they respond like, we're not evangelical. And he doesn't know what they are, because no one talks about this progressive Christianity to the point that the president, there aren't cable news segments where they're talking about, what y'all are talking about on this show. So there's a lot of work to be done just to be like, we exist, we're here, we're not anomalies. And yet I encounter so many people who think we are.
Yeah, and have always been a part, and I mean, you even mentioned that in your book, have always been a part of really progressive movements, churches. And the one thing that I didn't know, being a queer person, was the involvement of churches within like the gay rights movement. I know the Methodist church you talked about in New York City, being one, it was the first place. What was the group? It was PFLAG, correct?
PFLAG, the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, met at a Methodist church.
Yeah, and I had no idea that was like one of the first places, and that's like, I mean, the church was involved at the very beginning of that.
And people have always done, I mean, another thing I hear about is very little recognition about the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, and the fact that if you often mention your Christian faith in public, and I was one of the people that endorsed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and I saw all of the kind of reaction to that was screaming about abortion. And you have to be prepared, if you're ever going to talk about faith and politics, to have conservative fundamentalists yell at you about abortion. And yet there's no recognition that before Roe v. Wade, there was a whole network of pastors that were helping women, get reproductive health care. So on every issue, on peace, on immigration, there have always been progressive Christians, and always will be, I'd like to say. We just have to do our part in that long, going all the way back to Jesus and all the way into the future, until we, are living in the kingdom of God, which we hope to build together.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. And as you know, but some people who are watching might not, Just Talk Live is geared to young adults, even though our audience is wide. So what would you say, or what is the message in your book that you would like to get across to young adults about faith and politics, and how they can, one, exercise their faith, and yet be political and be a social public witness?
I would say don't let the kind of institutions and the way things have always been done deter what you believe is right. I talk about in the book my own kind of first involvement with faith and politics was around the illegal and immoral invasion of Iraq. And I was 13 at the time. And I think young people haven't been like as much jaded by the way, you know, different movements maybe they got involved, maybe, you know, our elders got involved with and then didn't work out. And so people are a little bit more pessimistic. There's this like childlike faith and optimism that you see in like the Sunrise Movement and other movements, the movement around gun violence, that are led by young people that are making these bold claims. That's really exciting. And so one of the people I talk about in the book is my favorite politician, my favorite Christian leader in this country, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And AOC very much talks about her faith. She said in a congressional hearing earlier this year, if Jesus were to himself come into this room, you'd call him a radical, which is true. I mean, and she fights. Fight to me is a good word, you know, like the Elizabeth Warren, like I'm going to fight kind of. So she's willing to fight people on the Green New Deal and these bold on Medicare for all, these kind of big, bold ideas that Christians should be the boldest people. We believe that everybody is made in the image of God. We believe that even the powers of the state couldn't kill Jesus, that love was more powerful than even the Roman Empire. Like, we should have the boldest ideas. And AOC really models that for me. And she talks about her faith. She talks about the Christian kind of case for the Green New Deal. So I hope young people watching can find inspiration in AOC, in other young activists who cite their faith as they do this work for social justice, and can, you know, get involved in whatever movements are happening in your local area. And I think the part about people are already doing that, but I'm encouraging people to be a little bit more vocal about if they are convicted to be involved in these movements because of their faith, to talk about that and to let that be known and to share with people about how their faith is inspiring them. So it's just not the counter protesters talking about Jesus.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because AOC has been depicted by like fundamentalists and right wing as this radical, gonna just turn over the country and like all this kinds of stuff. But and in many ways, I mean, and we hear that rhetoric with Joe Biden too against him, he himself is a devout Catholic. I mean, and prays and before anything, like, you know, like all these kinds of things that this rhetoric has really kind of uncovered. But I also want to go to a point that you made in the book about the skepticism of fellow progressives, which in some ways we kind of experienced that in the Presbyterian Church USA's Week of Action, because we shouldn't be involved in politics. We shouldn't support an organization that is secular and all these kinds of things. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that too, because we've kind of experienced that within our own institution in the past several weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, some of these things are like problems that come from a good place. So the separation of the church and state is a good thing, right? It protects both the church from government interference, and we live in a pluralistic society where you can pray and worship however you like, or you don't have to pray or worship or belong to any religion. It's a good thing. And people take it too far, and they use it as like this kind of trump card of separation of church and state. Churches need to not be political, and any talk of faith in politics is bad. And that comes from progressives. And for me, at least, that's harder to overcome than the kind of message from conservatives, which is, you know, talking about faith and politics is fine. You just get it wrong and you're totally misread the Bible. But the progressives can often feel like friends and people who are maybe in different movements with us or share similar goals, but they don't like what they term as the conflation of faith and politics. And that's a tough conversation to have, but I think a good one. And what I always go back to is the fact that people have throughout, like I go to history. I always go to like these people that inspire you, like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Would you have told him, you're a pastor, don't talk about politics? No, you would not. You would not say the people the social gospelers like FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt, who enacted all these, social safety net programs through the New Deal. You wouldn't say and talked about how their faith inspired them. You wouldn't say there was no room for faith in that. There would be no New Deal without the social gospel, without people talking about their faith and how it informed their politics. And yet it keeps a lot of progressive people of faith quiet because they don't want to face that criticism. It probably keeps a lot of people in a lot of churches quiet because someone will stand up within their own church. Again, this isn't like the conservative church across town that they're worried about. They're worried about people within their own church standing up and saying, no politics. And part of this is how I grew up. I grew up in a family. My parents are both union organizers, and I was around politicians. I was inspired by them. They've always seemed like real people to me. Here in Kentucky, I got involved in Charles Booker's campaign. Excited that he's joining my book launch later tonight. And getting involved in politics was never a bad thing. So part of it's like this anti-political sentiment, and then it's also the separation of church and state. And we just have to realize you're going to get some criticism when you do this work. And that's not intolerable. I have a whole section in the book about division is a fact of life. It was a fact of life for Jesus, that people are going to be upset. We should be prepared to answer them and talk about you can both care about your faith and how it informs your politics and not want Christian nationalism. Like the fact that I talk about my faith caring for immigrants does not make me a theocrat. And you just have to be willing to say that and face the criticism that we're all theocrats or getting the church involved in politics when politics is bad. So we got maybe a little thicker skin too, which a lot of churches are a little nervous about because you don't want to lose this member that maybe you don't want to lose anybody or lose their tithing, that kind of stuff. But I'd love to know what how y'all kind of encountered the criticism and have moved past it to continue your work.
Yeah, I think that depends on who it is. I feel like for us, I mean, we're of another generation, and also I haven't worked with the church very long, so I don't have this this deep connection to it. But I also think it's generational to say you're going to lose some people, and there are going to be people who aren't going to go along with that. And I also think that's to kind of realize that is also, I feel is a spiritual thing too, to realize that not everybody is going to get on board with something that they deem as so radical, but that is the gospel. That I think often in ministry, we don't let people go well. And I think that is something that we need to learn to do, is say like, this is what we believe. I mean, for me, it's very clear that is what the gospel is. And if that is not something that you believe, then I don't think the church is very good at saying blessings go with God and we have to move forward. But it being an institution that is run on finances and money, that's been a very interesting thing to kind of to hear. Yeah, the pushback.
Yeah. Coming from this, looking at it at both angles, from the political side and then now from the church side. In my previous role, you always have to walk that fine line, being an elected official in a very, very small city, but the capital state of Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg. Shout out to all my council members that are still doing good work back there. It is hard to be a non-conservative Christian because that is the rhetoric they're used to you portraying when you say you are a Christian and proclaiming your faith and hold an elected official position. So I'm excited about your book and how that's changing the narrative for people like me who were elected to say you can be a Christian and yes, you can care about social justice issues. And they do coincide. And it's okay to proclaim your faith through action. It doesn't have to be the daunting rhetoric that we always hear. But now, like Lee was saying, on the more working for the church in a national context, the experience is basically person by person. I mean, even though Lee and I are both in minority groups, we still have to deal with some of the privileges that we may or may not hold and how that shows up when we're trying to execute certain social justice issues that could be deemed political, like we talked about with the Week of Action. So I think it's just always a crazy, unorthodox kind of narrative when you compare the church and politics based off of some of the rhetoric that you hear. You have, even within our own denomination, the splits between faith and politics and how that shows up and plays. And also plays a role in our General Assembly all the way up. It's everything is political, if people like to admit it or not. And by trying to divide it and not come together and show good dialogue or try to have sustainable dialogue on how to move forward is when we hurt each other. So I appreciate that you were here talking to us about this book and that you wrote this book and is coming from a different narrative than what is usually portrayed through faith and politics. And lastly, before you go, we just want you to give us any final thoughts, any final words. Where can we find your book? Where can we, all of the things.
Reclaiming Progressive Christianity.
Available
wherever books are sold. Oh, look, there's a title there. That's great. Yeah, I'm grateful to talk about the themes in the book. I'm really looking forward. I guess I can put it down now, to have this conversation with people. And, I think what you just shared, Destiny, is really my goal, is to kind of give people some language and some encouragement, especially elected officials who I work with often, who, when going back to what I was saying about AOC, talking about Jesus coming into Congress, that is that's, her Catholic faith was how she was raised and informs her politics. That's not a danger to the church. That's not a danger to society. She's not saying you have to be a Christian to be elected to office, right? She endorsed Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders talks about how people's faith is in action. And he went and he's talked about Pope Francis, coming from his Jewish perspective, talking about Pope Francis, and they are aligned a lot about the environment. So there's a good place for faith in politics. And, I'm excited every chance I get to come back and talk with you all about it, because it's my favorite topic. And every conversation we've had has given me life and inspired me in my work. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. And on a busy day too, after this, Guthrie is going to a launch party, and because this is the day that the book is that the book has come out in all stores. So we are so happy for you, and we are so grateful that you are here with us tonight on such a busy night, and to stop by to talk about something that I think will be a topic for, years to come, to how we change the narrative of what it means to be Christian, specifically here in this country, which has had such an interesting way of perceiving what being Christian means. So thank you. We appreciate you for all your work, and y'all go out and get the book. It's right here. The link is in the comment section. So click it, go get it. It's great. Use it for your churches. And Guthrie, I'm sure we'll see you again as a regular guest. And have fun at your launch party.
Yes, congratulations once again.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Well, Destiny,
that was awesome. I'm glad that he made time for us, because I know we had some heavy hitters on that list, and I was looking at, who's going to be interviewing him today. And I'm just grateful that Guthrie chose to stop by Just Talk Live, because
that's really great. I'm really glad. And it's interesting because one of the comments that someone put up, and I'm going to show it. A member of our church was the coordinator of the pastoral network in the 1960s that assisted women in need of abortion services.
I didn't know.
And yeah, and but I do want people to know that there is a whole other way of being Christian in the world, and I didn't know that growing up. Did you? I'm sure you have a different context.
Yeah, I do have a different context. Like I said, small African American church started during the Civil War, Civil War era. And it was a pillar in the Harrisburg community for like a Black beacon. So my context is a little different. So yes, I grew up that way. But it is just nice to have the narrative being changed and shaped and formed. And during a time like this, I think Guthrie's book is going to be very profound and kind of set the course of what Christianity could be, especially during this time of COVID, where people are unsettled and unrest, and and they're questioning with everything that's going on in the world, how does my faith show up in these social justice movements? How can my faith show up during advocacy? How can my faith show up in all of the things that we are called to be as Christians and disciples of Jesus Christ? But sometimes we're not sure how to live into it. Or like you're always saying, Lee, there's other narratives that dominate that control. So that way those voices are stifled. So I'm really excited about the book. I am. And I think that it's going to do really well, and hopefully can lead a lot of good discussion for congregations and peoples in the pews.
Yeah, I think it, and I grew up on the other side of the conversation that this book starts in, and that like the church that is interested in soul saving, interested in and salvation, other than the other narrative that you find all throughout Scripture that does deal with social issues, more so than probably the soul saving. There were times where Jesus healed people and it didn't require faith. Like, Jesus didn't require somebody to believe in order to heal. Jesus met people's needs because they needed to be met. And I grew up we helped people, and in some ways we were taught that in church that we needed to help people. But like being really involved in the political conversation and how your faith influences that was something that I learned in college, was something that my eyes were opened and then when I did the YAV program, shout out to the Young Adult Volunteer Program, was when I really did learn about how faith really does speak to how we are to be engaged in conversation. And the week of action really did put that in to full view with our church, I think. When we took a stance, I mean, pretty upfront. It wasn't one of those like weird mixed messages that nobody could really understand. But we really did clearly state that we affirm that all Black Lives Matter. And we got so much pushback because of that. And one of the biggest rhetorics was we were being too political. And Guthrie's book does mention that is a common pushback. But Jesus was political in so many ways. And and my context is very different. And Guthrie does talk a little bit about the Black church in his book, about how many Black churches were and still are very focused on justice. And I do think, how the context in which we are in really reflects the narratives in which we interact with our faith too. So I'm really glad that this book came out, because I think this will kind of spark a more so that we really need to reclaim. And and Guthrie talked about how we are starting something, kind of new in the progressive Christianity.
Yeah, I just hope that, like you stated just now, that if there are young political leaders or if there are young Christian leaders and they want to demonstrate their faith in action, that they won't be scared, that they will speak out. Because I will say my faith definitely is what pushed me into politics. Seeing political leaders in my congregation, and then my Presbyterian Women of Carlisle group supporting me every step of the way, and being Presbyterian and education being a fundamental block, is what led me to run for school board. So you can't separate identities, and that's something that I think we talk about a lot too on our show, is that you are who you are, and people want to put you in a box, and you can't put certain things in the box. Your whole being is you, and those things show up and go hand in hand. But going back to your plug for the YAV program, if you are looking for a virtual experience, we are still accepting applications and applicants for our virtual program. You have until September 29th to apply. It is open for ages 18 to 30, young adults. We aren't giving away any stipends or housings or anything in that nature, but you will have an option to opt into our student loan service program. So if you are interested in the Young Adult Volunteer Program, message me, hit me up. If you want to know more about being a YAVA, I'm just going to throw Lee out there. Message Lee. He'll talk to you about it. I'm offering his services. But
yeah, just let me know. I was a young adult volunteer, and it really was a program that really spoke, to what we're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. Is that you realize that your faith really influences, how you act in the world and how you want to see the world be. You want to, and how you want that world to reflect the kingdom of God. And what justice means, and our faith really influences that. And I do credit the YAV program for that, and for getting me into the ministry. I don't think I would be a reverend if it wasn't for that. So I do credit the YAV program for changing my mentality about what being a Christian means. And also accepting myself, my whole identity, as Destiny was saying, which I think can be so beneficial for people if we could rethink what Christianity is, that that being a follower of Jesus also reflects accepting the fullness of yourself, because we were all created in the image of God, and all of yourself, and investigating that and accepting that. So I do credit that program, the YAF program, for that. And I'll give a little shout out. This is going to be a shorter episode because Guthrie had a tight schedule. But I do want to shout out to Unbound. If you are a writer, if you are someone who writes about the intersections of faith and justice, send an email out to me, or you can send an email to info@justiceunbound.org if you are interested in writing. And we also wanted to update everyone before we go on what's coming up. So, Destiny, I'm going on vacation next week. Praise the Lord for that.
Amen.
And because of that, we are going to do a rerun of an episode. We haven't. We can decide that now. Should we do the one about voter suppression?
Yeah, I was going to say, or should we let people decide? Like, should we run a little tab or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
People pick the rerun, or you just
want to maybe people can. Maybe people can pick which rerun that we want to see. But if we don't get any responses, we'll rerun the voter suppression one, because voting, we want to encourage everyone to vote, but we want everyone to also be educated about about ways in which their voting has been suppressed in this country and is currently being suppressed as we speak, as we are on this show. So maybe, and if we don't get any suggestions, we will rerun that. And then on September the 29th, we are going to be having the co-moderators of the Presbyterian Church USA, Alona Street Stewart and Gregory Bentley, who are wonderful people, and they're going to speak about what it means to be co-moderators of the Peace USA, but also a lot about their vision of what the church can be. And then, Destiny, do you want to mention what's going to happen?
Take it away, Lee. You take it away. You got this. You're just on a roll.
And also something we're really excited about. We're going to be having it's called the Youth Rising Coalition concert, and it will be a way for us to not only raise awareness for youth, but also ways to raise some financial support for a Youth Rising Coalition. And if you don't know what Youth Rising Coalition is, it is a program out of the Presbyterian of Baltimore that empowers youth entrepreneurs. And so we're going to have artists and musicians and all kinds of people to be on the show in October to support them. And we are really excited about that. So that's all I have, I think. We have a lot coming up. So is there anything else, Destiny?
No.
Think that's good?
Nope.
Awesome.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Yep.
So we're taking a break.
Yes. We are going to take a break next week. And
we've been going live since April 7th.
Yeah.
Okay. Coming to you live with new content since April 7th. So we deserve a break.
Yes. I think today will be our 28th episode. So we're gonna take a little break next week, but we're coming back, and we will be with you indefinitely. Who
Can't get rid of us, right?
Yeah. So until next time, everyone, get out there and vote. Make sure you vote early, mail-in vote, send it in as early as possible. and start changing the narrative of what it means to be a Christian, and get involved. Yeah. So until we will see you in a couple weeks.